And welcome back to Janky AF and Year of the Aerostar, episode number 70. Well, we are back. We are continuing our Mexican residency. I hope some of you enjoyed that little different car review we did over the weekend. If you have not, please do check it out. The Poop Mobile, very on brand for Janky. Janky AF is, of course, a subsidiary of Janky Painting and Toilet Company, LLC. But that's neither here nor there for today. We are back in Mexico. We are here doing our Aerostar residency in Mexico. We've had some really great Janky Aerostars, also some very, nicer Aerostars, and we're going to highlight sort of everything. But today I found this very special one, which was near and dear to me. And so we're going to talk about it. So without further ado, here is a 1986 Ford Aerostar, listed for free in Guadalajara, sorry I messed it up, Jalisco, Mexico. Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. That is the state and the country and the city. Guadalajara is one of my favorite words to say ever. It just rolls off the tongue beautifully, Guadalajara. And so here we are. Now, obviously, you can see this beauty in front of us, and it is, of course, a 1986. Now, that is a rare bird in the Aerostar world. I've noticed in Mexico there are a lot of, 80s Aerostars, 88s, 89s, 90s, 91s. A lot of the earlier Aerostars seem to have made their way down there. Now, again, if you're in the comments and you happen to know if these were sold natively in Mexico, please let me know. But it may just be a product of age, that as these cars aged out of their original owners' useful lives, they were traded or sold or made it down to Mexico. That, or cars just survive longer down there, and so these were originally native to Mexico, and they just survived longer than they would have in the States. In the United States, we have a very consumeristic throwaway culture. And I feel like other countries are a little bit more thrifty, a little bit more, just caring of taking care of things and making them last for a long time. And it seems like in either case, however it came to pass, there are more like older 80s Aerostars out there. And 1986 being the special one because it is the first year of production. It's the first year, as I like to say, before they worked all the kinks out. I, of course, myself have a 1986 Ford Aerostar, and you can watch those videos if you would like to. I'll try to put a link up on the screen. And I've never seen I've seen a couple of 86 Aerostars out there in the classifieds in my day. I've seen quite a few Aerostars. I actually purchased a second 1986 Aerostar and then sold it to my buddy Evan. And we'll talk about that later. So I've owned two 1986 Aerostars. I've seen a few more, but, a handful, probably less than 5 in my entire time. Close to 10 years of scouring the internet for Ford Aerostars. So that just gives you like a ratio. And here we have a 1986. And what's better is that it's listed for free. So this is the second free Aerostar we've seen during our Mexican residency. So that is also fantastic. So let's get into the description. I'm going to butcher some more Spanish. And let's talk about it. About this vehicle. Driven 1,000 kilometers. Well, that sounds like low mileage. Manual transmission. Ding, ding, ding. Another sort of, golden star for the Aerostar in terms of rare things. So not only is it an 86, but it's a manual. So that's the same spec as mine, which is really, really rare. Exterior color beige. Interior color gray. Fuel type is gasoline. And the engine size -1 liter. I don't know what's going on with these displacement figures in Mexico, or why it doesn't translate, but you're getting these negative integers. It doesn't make any sense to me. Don't know. Seller's description: Ford Aerostar 86. I can't say 86 in Spanish, I apologize. Estandar Original. Now, thank you to the person who commented, I believe your name was Daniel or David, that Estandar simply means manual transmission in Spanish. So I'm learning. This is kind of great. I'm actually learning some words here, so it's very beneficial to me. Original, obviously. 4 cilindros. Okay, ding, ding, ding again. It's the 4-cylinder. So not only is it an 86, but a manual transmission and the 4-cylinder fuel-injected Lima inline 4 that was only in the Aerostar for 2 years, and they pulled it. Now, I've seen some early, like 87s that claim to have, or 86s even, that claim to have the 3-liter in them, which is very strange to me. Maybe it was always an option from the start and they didn't tell people, or maybe even as early as 86 they were starting to offer the 3-liter. But that again is another story for another day. This one has the super rare. I had a person comment on one of my videos saying I'd never seen actual evidence of the 4-cylinder in an Aerostar. They saw my video and saw that, so that was kind of an honor to be able to give that person, you know, the reassurance that it is a real thing. And here we have it again here. Debe refrandos. Don't know what that means. Now all caps. Ofrezcan el precio se puede tratar. I think precio is price. I don't know what anything else means. Detalles de lámina, pintura y tapicería por año. Año is year. Pueden pasar a verla sin compromiso. Compromiso. Okay, again, I apologize to anyone who speaks Spanish and you're listening to me butcher this, but hopefully you get some sort of humor out of it. So let's see the translation and, you know, see what this says. Okay, 86 Ford Aerostar, standard original, 4 cylinders. Must refrain. What does that mean? Offer. The price can be negotiable. You know, the Google Translate hasn't quite, you know, worked all the kinks out. Speaking of working kinks out, I don't see how the price is negotiable if it's free. When you gonna say it's free? I'll give you $10. Details of foil painting. Now I thought Pintura was painting and upholstery for the year. You can come and see it with no obligation. So not only is it free, but the free price is negotiable, and you can come see it with no obligation to offer the seller more than the free price that it already is. So that's fantastic, you know, very welcoming. Okay, so let's get into it. Obviously, the windshield wipers are up, which maybe they were just cleaning it, which is funny, but it's also funny to see, you know, that's a thing that we do up in, you know, the northeast colder climates of, you know, the United States, where we put the windshield wipers up so they don't freeze. So they've done this here, which interesting look. Another reason why I was just so drawn to this, not only is an 86 4-cylinder 5-speed, but it even has the big towing mirrors that mine has, and those are even kind of rare too. You see them more so in the earlier models. Lovely little Volkswagen Beetle in the corner there, which I might add. It looks like it even has the sort of tape over the lights to make it, you know, those rally style lights, but I digress. Okay, very interesting here. Now, another thing I love about the early Aerostars is they switched up all the location of the badging later, but I love how the Aerostar badge is right here on your front quarter panel. I think it just like evokes sort of like a sports car, you know. That's like where Ferrari puts its big crest on the models that have it. And it just, it's very loud and proud. You know, you're letting people know. You don't have to go around the back of the vehicle to see what it is. Right there on the front quarter panel, you're driving an Aerostar. And I think the way the Aerostar font is the A has this big angular swoop to it that perfectly models the profile of the vehicle itself. See, I've talked about all these little details on the Aerostar. This is one of the best ones. Like, even the badging of the Aerostar mirrors the profile of the car. Like, they were so committed to, you know, this design and this ethos, the language of the Aerostar and what it connoted, you know, like the space age and, like, you know, modern features and doing something that was never been done before, pushing boundaries, you know. Everything that they talked about in the Aerostar was reflected in the smallest details of it. And I think that's so cool because they really, thought about everything, and it's such just from like a design and advertising standpoint, it's such a cohesive package. And I always say it's like the most aspirational vehicle ever because, this is like a utility vehicle. It was meant to either haul families around or haul stuff around. And so that usually, and you see it now with like Transits and Ram ProMasters and Sprinters, like they have this sort of boxy, clunky look, and they're just seen as utility vehicles. They're not really advertised as something that's, has any verve or pizzazz to it, any identity to it. And the Aerostar was the complete opposite, where it was this like revolutionary thing. And they just pushed the idea of it so hard. And I think in hindsight, like 35, almost 40 years on from the introduction of the Aerostar, you really see how unique it was, and you really see how just by the volume, over 2 million vehicles sold, it was a popular model. I always tell people, like so many people I meet that had an Aerostar, or their family had an Aerostar, they had multiple Aerostars. So serial Aerostar ownership was a very, very common thing, and that just speaks to, people bought one, eventually they got tired or it was time to trade it in. A lot of them were sort of rode hard and put away wet because they were utility vehicles. So you had 4 kids in there just destroying it, or you were throwing boxes in the back and all that. So, they had a lifespan to them, and after they traded it in, they would get another one. So I think that just also speaks to like, sort of the Aerostar's just timeless place in automotive history. Forgotten by many, but for the ones that remember, I think it is a really cherished vehicle. So moving on, I will point out, we can see it in the next picture. Now, of course, you do have your original 5 slot grille, which I think looks just fantastic. And it really, it's amazing how just a little thing, a little detail like that can completely change the look of a vehicle. But when you see an Aerostar with like an original 5 slot grille, it totally brings it back into the 80s, where the newer 3-spoke grille, it's more round, it's got more curves in it, it's much more 90s. And this flat one kind of works with the, the body style of the Aerostar. I'm not going to say better, because I think the 3-spoke grille, we're all sort of more used to looking at that one. But the 5-spoke, or the 5 slot, just looks tremendous on here, and it really does bring into the 80s, especially with these big towing mirrors, especially with your big, and of course this was changed in later models. Your dash became this big sort of like curved swooping thing. Here you just have this big giant box. So it's sort of the purest version of the Aerostar in a way. And I always say that the Aerostar is so cool because it's this singular shape that ran from 86 to 97, no changes. And then for whatever reason, when they came out with a more, front-wheel drive passenger minivan, it changed to the Windstar, later to the Freestar. But it's surprising to me that they actually didn't carry on the Aerostar namesake because it was so popular. Like the Taurus lived on through multiple generations, the Explorer lived on through multiple generations, the Bronco lived on through multiple generations, still lives on today. All these marks, but the Aerostar, for whatever reason, just stands in time as this singular shape. So in hindsight, I'm really glad that they didn't, rebadge the, when they came out with the Windstar, they didn't call it an Aerostar. Now, part of that may be because in 1995, they were going to cease production of the Aerostar because they had the Windstar coming out. And, basically customers and dealerships were saying, we love this thing, keep making it, we have a use for it. And so they made it for 2 years until further crash regulations came out, and it was just cost prohibitive to keep it going on, which I always wonder about, because the Chevy Astro ran all the way to 2004, and that got like a refresh, and the body looks a little bit different. So in hindsight, I'm also glad that they didn't significantly change the Aerostar to make it conform to these regulations, even though it would have been cool if it lived on to all the way till 2004. But I like that it stands as a singular shape. All that being said, the grille, the headlights, these are not flush headlights like they were after, I think, 92. They were 91 or 92. They were the, just your old school glass bulbs that are sunk into this bezel here. So for how singular it is, there were some changes on it. And if you know where to look, you can kind of easily identify about which vintage these came from. So that's that. Okay, we have the back here. Again, your original taillights with the amber. Now I love this. It's just a, you know, a standard wheelbase. The extended, I shouldn't say wheelbase, because the wheelbase was always the same, 119.4 inches, I believe. But the length, the standard length was the only option available until maybe 88 or 89, 90. So it's just, you know, everything in its sort of like essential form. Now here you probably do have a badge that would say electronic fuel injection. That has sort of been removed, as has the Ford logo. Seems like it has all sorts of degradation going on this. And it is funny, this, it's white, but it is a beige. You know, it's an accurate color description because it's just this barely this off-white, which you can kind of see in some light better than others. The other interesting thing is it's also a two-tone. Now I wonder if this, you know, obviously you have some denting going on here. Your bumper's like a little loose. It's a little janked up, which I don't mind, obviously. But I'm wondering if this lower panel here, this brown, it almost looks like that, what do they call it, that Mocha Frost, which was a color later in the Aerostar's run. It almost looks like that maybe has been painted on later. You know, a lot of times when there's rust repair, they'll just paint like a long horizontal strip. It's usually done in black. You see that on a lot of trucks up here. But maybe it is a true two-tone. I'm not sure. You think if it was, then these bumpers would be the same as that. But this bumper looks like it's been painted several times. So hard to know really if it was completely all white. But I've never seen another 86 in this white or this like slightly off-white beige color. And I think it looks really, really nice. Obviously you're just rear liftgate, no barn doors. This is a passenger model. And here we see some more, you know, just you know, elements of jankiness, but it really doesn't look too bad overall. You know, overall it's pretty clean, especially compared to some other Aerostars that we've seen down here. So, again, I've talked about this. I don't know if these seats were reupholstered, but I keep seeing seats in these Aerostars down in Mexico that were never. They don't look at all like the factory Aerostar seats that I've seen, you know, thousands of times in other Aerostars. So it's possible that they were reupholstered, but you would think in that case that even like the, you know, at least the patterns would be the same or something like that. I've never seen this sort of brown cloth with all this detail in it. I love, I love the stitch job here. It looks like, you know, Nightmare Before Christmas or something like that. This is how I sew. When I sew things, when I sew a patch onto something or when I'm whatever, I don't sew that often, but when I sew, this is exactly how it looks. And like when I end the sew thing, I just like do it like 100 times and try to tie it in some sort of, you know, janky knot so it holds it together, which looks like they've done there. I wouldn't change this at all. I love how the stitching is just all over the place and holds everything together. You know, to me with like the jankiness, it's always the effort that counts. It's like they could have just left this unstitched, and like they're probably not going to pay to get some professional to do like a stitch job on this Aerostar that's for free. But someone at some point took the time, got a needle and thread out, and just stitch the seat back together. And that's what I care about. I care about that someone took the time and cared enough to like actually attempt and indeed to execute like a repair on this seat. Great shot here. We get the view of all three pedals, obviously. It's a original manual transmission. This is a gripe I have with Apple, where you're trying to move the window and these little widgets or whatever pop up. Neither here nor there, but you know, it's like I'm not even close to that side of the screen, but I digress. I've talked about this when we've looked at other manual transmission Aerostars, that the knob on these eventually was changed. And I think perhaps even the entire shift lever. It looks like the ones from like 93 on was just like a straight lever, whereas this one has a little bit of a kink into it and it looks a little bit narrower. And your shift knob is also a little bit different. On the newer ones, I think it's actually kind of just painted on the top of the ball, whereas in these, it's like embossed into the rubber, which I actually think is a nicer look. It looks, I don't want to say the newer ones look cheap, but this sort of just looks like a little bit more I don't know, it has a certain like gravitas to it, being that the numbers are actually etched into the top of the knob. I just think that's cool. But I would like to have one of each eventually. Now this does have the tan interior, just like my 86. A lot of similarities here. Same steering wheel. And what a cool sort of like Star Trek looking, you know, not quite triangle, but just like the weird two-spoke steering wheel that you had on these with a nice little horn indentation. Now the post facelift Aerostars, I absolutely love that steering wheel. I think it's one of the best steering wheels ever. They use it on everything from the Aerostar to, I believe, Mustangs to the Mercury Capri, that little convertible that I love. But this steering wheel, in the looks department, it's hard to beat. It's a really cool sort of like retro futuristic looking steering wheel. Obviously your crank windows, and this pre-facelift interior, it's much just not as well put together, quite frankly. You have a lot of panel gaps, especially around your stereo and stuff like that, but all your buttons are just like sort of really clunky and bulbous, but very functional too. Like a lot of toggle switches for everything, for your wipers and for your lights. It's funny to operate wipers from like a toggle switch. You know, we're so used to doing it on the little switch levers on the side here. So it's a unique experience driving it, which I really like. Like, you know, everything's just like a little different. You got to get used to it. But that's the great thing about older cars and classic cars, is that you get all these little tactile experiences that you don't get in modern cars, which I really like. Again, this is so common. Like this looks like it's all like faded, and it is cracked here, but I think this was pretty much the fit of the stereo, like from the factory. They're just like, well, yeah, it's close enough. Just like ram it in there. It's fine. And you do have two little vents there as well. Hard to see here, but you have a beautiful Aerostar badge right along the dashboard there. And your vents are actually, you know, inset quite nicely here. Again, even like the design of the vent with all these like long slots that curve and bend around, and then you have your little fan vent there. All of it just looks cool, you know. Maybe like after a certain age anything starts to look cool, but again, just these little details are so cool to me. Again, so here you have a kind of a good, you know, your hot and cold are on a single toggle switch, and you have your defroster, your fan speed, and things of that nature. Just a wonderful interior. Okay, here you go. So here is, you know, you can tell it's the 4-cylinder pretty easily here, because you have your, you know, your block down here, and then your valve cover, I guess you would say, right, over here, and then obviously your big plastic air box, which is very funny. It does make you wonder how it's going to hold up over time, but stamped with the Ford logo. Your oil cap is very interesting. This is where you add oil, and this oil cap has like a long tube on it, and it screws on tightly, but it's just like a weird, I don't know, you'd have to see it. It's a weird fit when it screws on there, and of course with like the tube connecting it. Just an interesting design. But I think this little Lima 4-cylinders is kind of legendary. I think you can actually get quite a bit of power out of it. I believe this was also available in the Mustang. So definitely a cool little engine, and the fact that it was fuel injected back in '86 in like a cargo van or a minivan is pretty cool. And it was the only fuel injected engine option at the start, because the 2.8 liter V6, which was the upgrade, was carbureted. So that's kind of cool. And then of course they bragged about it on the back with the electronic fuel injection. Great view of the jank here. Obviously, you're just steel wheels, which if these would fit a hubcap. I can tell these have these little tabs on them here that would fit those dog dish hubcaps that I've talked about, and that would certainly dress this Aerostar up. It does look like perhaps this is like sort of was painted at some point, and you know, who knows what's going on behind there. This might be a patch on a patch on a patch, but that's okay. You know, it's a 1986 Aerostar for free with a manual transmission. Interior, again, I've never seen this pattern before, you know, upholstery wise. Now it does say something about the upholstery, so maybe it's been replaced. Everything looks weird and different on here. Like usually there's just big plastic panels everywhere, and then your headliner looks like they just went head to toe in this, whatever this material was. And I've never seen how they sort of These might all be custom because your plastic molding sort of wrapped around all this. And it seems like when they reupholstered it, they put in these like sort of custom boxes. Because this doesn't look like just like a metal shell of an Aerostar. It actually looks like they like, you know, put a second little casing on there to dress it up. And so their upholstery didn't have to be perfect. You know, they put the upholstery and tacked it on and put these little like boxes, these little casings in afterwards. And I'll tell you, like, yeah, it's janky, but someone did a lot of work on the interior of this vehicle. Like, you know, that's either custom fabrication or maybe there was an aftermarket part. But very, very interesting. You know, as we see this Volkswagen Beetle in the background again, you know, if these vans could tell stories, I mean, they do tell stories, but I want to know, you know, I want to see the progression of this Aerostar. You know, this thing's been around for 35 years, you know, and all the different experiences it's had, all the people that have driven in it and rode in it. It's so cool, you know. It's why I like thrift store shopping is fun, because you just wonder, you know, what stories these things could tell. And if you're into it, you know, not everyone is, but if you're into it, there's something kind of cool about taking something that's been used and sort of carrying on that tradition of being the next person to get some use out of it. Again, we kind of see this little carpeting that's over here. Looks like we have a speaker hole here. And again, I've never seen, you know, it almost looks like they may have even changed the window system entirely, because all these windows are supposed to pop out, or rather slide. Like the Aerostar was kind of famous because it had these sliding side windows, which were better than most other minivans, because most other minivans, they just had a little thing that would pop out. This is before they had roll down windows in minivans, which is actually quite recent. But these don't look like the slider windows. These look like pop out windows. So it's, you know, I wonder if they even actually went through all the trouble to change the glass in here too. When you think about it, it's sort of a massive undertaking. For, you know, maybe they did this a long time ago and got a lot of use out of it, and now they're sort of passing it on to the next person. As you can see, these sort of rivets here that are holding in the glass, but you don't see the sliders. You don't see those. I'm just sort of noticing this now. These panels of glass look a lot more simplistic and even like modern, and I don't even see any like weather stripping around them either on the outside, which is interesting. You wonder how that would hold up. But they're just sort of flush in there, and then they're screwed in from the inside. And I guess maybe they just pop out, or maybe they're even fixed. I don't know. But certainly a lot of customization done to this vehicle in a very sort of subtle way. So that's pretty cool. And we'll cruise through the inside one more time. I just really love this interior shot. Really, really nice. And I'll tell you, to drive these things, yes, they're slow. But with that giant, you know, school bus shift lever, and, you know, second, third gear, doing little pulls in those gears. It's so mechanical. It's so analog, and because the car's not that big, it's like a little top heavy, but man, they are so fun to drive, because there's body roll and that, but the experience of driving one of these with a manual transmission is so fun. And I highly encourage anyone out there, if you're looking for like a weird, quirky car, or if you're an Aerostar enthusiast, try to find a manual, because it's a totally different driving experience, and it's very, very engaging. So there you have it. Happy to be back here in our Mexican residency here in Year of the Aerostar. I hope you've enjoyed this one. I've certainly yammered on quite long enough. We'll have another fine Aerostar for you soon. We're going to do this Mexican residency as long as we can. I've gotten inundated, and I say janky do thanky, with all these sort of new listings, and some of them I got a lot more foreign listings to do, so I'm going to try to sort of maybe batch record a bunch of these Mexican ones so I can get those other ones like Poland, Russia, and I think Switzerland even. So I don't want to, not that I think those Aerostars will sell as quickly as the ones in like Ohio, but I want to get them before they're gone, because that's truly like you know, historical. I want to be able to show all the different countries that these Aerostars have made it to. But for now, we're going to stay in Mexico, and there's so many to look at, and we'll give you a good sampling of them. So we'll have another one soon, and until then, janky do thanky.
One small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.